California, the land of opportunity. The land that shaped the southwestern side of the United States as we know it today. California has been known for creating lots of trends, starting with the gold rush in 1849, and then later, in 1903, the boom of the oil industry created thousands of new opportunities for incoming settlers and immigrants, as well as for the economy of the United States. For years, textbooks have taught us and made us believe that California was established in Northern California, specifically in the Bay Area, which has been the epicenter for hundreds of trends for decades. But what about Southern California? We all know that SoCal is home to the most beautiful beaches, high-class living, and of course, Hollywood. But what if Northern California wasn't the epicenter for the growth of California? What if the discovery of the first exploitation of oil took place in Southern California right under our feet? Mentryville, California, located just off of the I-5 North on Lyons Avenue in Santa Clarita, is known to be the first successful commercial oil refinery in California, and is also the longest working refinery since its start, finally coming to an end in 1990. Evan Decker, the youngest board member of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, is a frequent visitor of Mentryville, and was more than happy to give us a tour through Mentryville's past.
The history of Mentryville really starts with the birth of Chevron actually started here in September of 1876. Well, actually prior to that, in 1869, Beale, Lyons, and Wiley, they were digging around up here in the canyon, just about maybe 3-4 miles up the canyon, and they found oil. But Mentryville actually started, really, if you want to get down to it, is September 26, 1876, when Charles Alexander Mentary, he actually was up in the canyon digging for oil, and he struck a oil pocket, shot 60 feet up in the air, and that's when you have that's when really the birth of Mentryville.
Charles Alexander Mentary, born in France on March 27, 1847, came to the Newhall area in 1873 to find his fortune. After punching 42 successful oil wells near Titusville, Pennsylvania, Mentary got a job digging wells in the Grapevine Canyon. In 1875, he formed a partnership to purchase a claim in nearby Pico Canyon, which had been explored in the late 1860s by Newhall entrepreneurs. As Mentrary's oil extraction started booming, other men started flocking to the area. Newhall was only a month old at the time of Mentrary's find, and barely anything was built. In order to accommodate so many men, Mentary would build bunkhouses. Men who had wives and children would build small houses around the area. From there, men and women named the town after their superintendent, Charles Alexander Mentary, and the boomtown Mentryville was formed.
Now, in terms of the town, there were more buildings dotted along the canyon, and but most of those buildings are gone now because most of the civilians that lived up here, they either packed up their houses and moved to Newhall, which was about 3 to 4 miles from here, or they just tore everything down and threw out their lumber and bought a house down in Newhall.
Mentryville, which was later bought out by Standard Oil of California, which then turned into what we know today as Chevron, started out with 4 successful wells drilled into the ground. However, well number 4 was Mentrary's favorite. Mentary began drilling well number 4 in July of 1876 and struck oil on September 26, 1876. The well immediately began producing 25 barrels a day. It is known as the most successful well out of the 4, and this is what that well looks like today.
Right now we're on the site of the first commercially successful oil well in the Western Hemisphere and the longest commercially successful oil well in the world. Right now we're on the site of Pico number 4, or CSO number 4. This rusty old pipe was spudded in, this is where Alex Mentary discovered his oil in September of 1876. And originally it was a derrick. It was a wooden tower where they would, it was a wooden derrick. And then sometime in the 1940s is when they turned it into what they call a grasshopper rig. And this is the oldest known running oil well in the world, like I said. It was finally capped off February 8th, 1990. And the side of it now is a capped off pipe here and two signs. This one over here is from the Department of Interior, and that was put in 1966. And this one over here behind me was put in the 1953, I think. This whole area, this would have been called the Pico oil field. And there were everything from the machine shops to the field office, the oil derricks. I mean, this place was towering. All these canyons around us were towered with oil derricks.
The oil business at Mentryville got so big, they had to add another location in the nearby town of Newhall to refine and store the oil.
So right now we're at the Pioneer Oil Refinery, and these structures were built in 1876, around that time. And it only lasted for about 12 years. The refinery shut down in 1884. But this is actually the oldest existing refinery west of the Mississippi River. And it is all original. This here behind me is the pump house. So they would have pumped the oil, they would have refined it in those two vats behind the pump house. When it came out of the oil derricks from the field, be piped along through a pipeline, pumped through this pump house up to the refining vats. And that's how it would have been done. Now, this is probably the most historic part in the oil development in Southern California. And it is it is a state registered landmark, but it needs a little help. And but you can see it is one of the last relics of the early discovery of oil, or early development of oil in Southern California.
That pipeline that pumped the crude oil from Mentryville to this refinery still exists today as a relic at the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society.
This is the pipeline that we saw up in Pico Canyon, and it comes all the way down here, runs between Mentryville and the Pioneer Oil Refinery. Now, what's interesting is we did not know this stretch of it was here originally. About 3 or 4 years ago, we were digging for irrigation. We came across the pipe, and so it sits here as a poignant reminder of early oil discovery in Santa Clarita and Southern California. Now, what's really neat, if you look really close, notice how in diameter how big the pipe is. It's about a good 4 to 5 inches in diameter. This is, and all this oil that was running between Mentryville and the refinery, that is a lot of oil. And so you can give yourself an idea of how much oil was coming out of Pico Canyon in turn of 1880, 1890, 1900. And so, but all that's left now is the rusty old pipe.
So, should the establishment of the Industrial Revolution in the West stay in Northern California? Or should the trophy be passed down to Southern California? As our friend Evan Decker says,
if you want to talk about Southern California in terms of oil development, this is where you start off, Mentryville.
You decide.